All right, welcome everybody. Sorry we're starting a couple of minutes late. We had a little snafu on pushing a button. Thank you very much for joining my session on cool handlebar merge language tricks. I'm Bill Fetter, and we are going to get started. I'm primarily a consultant in Pardot and Salesforce ecosystem. I have my own consulting business after being in corporate world for over 28 years, and got to say, loving every minute of it. So let's get started. I'm going to take you through 4 basic sections today. We're going to talk about what's handlebar merge language anyway, why use it, the basic fields and the patterns to use, and then 5 cool tricks and riffs on those tricks for using it in your Pardot org. So let's start off with, what is handlebar merge language? Well, it's those curly brackets on your keyboard, and it replaces the $% merge fields pattern in Pardot. Those $% merge fields will still work, but handlebar merge language gives you a whole lot of new capabilities that you did not have before. Now, this feature has to be enabled in your Pardot org if it's older and you've not already done so. So if it's not enabled, you're going to see a little gray banner like this one that says streamline your tailored marketing content. That will show until you do the update. So I've got a quick poll here, just for the sake of everyone. If you look in the poll section, who's enabled HML in your org? If there's anybody on here who'd like to answer that question, we can go ahead with that. So anyway, you have to enable it before it'll even work, and it's automatic. And when you do that, it will start to migrate all of your previous email templates that had the old merge field format in it as you use them. All right, so let's start with why do merge fields in the first place? Well, of course, why we use merge tags is, isn't it nice to feel special, except when it doesn't work, like this one, which is an actual example that a client of mine got from QuickBooks, where it says to her, "Hello, not provided. I am your client rep." Bad data practice here. Never, ever, ever, ever put something in a field that should be null with something that is data you don't want to show your client. So don't use not provided when the field should be blank, because not provided, your feedback is very important to us. So this is just a bad data practice, and we don't want to use it. Because using a null field or a blank field is super critical to the whole concept of handlebar merge language. It's because basically handlebar merge language is a yes null question or a yes blank question. It's like a light switch, something versus nothing in the field, and that's how it works. It's basically this form of super simple dynamic content that's available to all levels of Pardot accounts. So even if you don't have a level of Pardot account that includes dynamic content, you still have the dynamic content that's available to you in HML. And sure, using HML, you can do the same thing that you did before in the past with using merge tags by saying, hey, hello, my friend's name, but it's actually much, much more than that. So one thing I did for your all's convenience, so that you don't have to, is I did a field comparison, because I couldn't find one anywhere, of the old the old merge tag fields against the new HML fields side by side, so you can actually see the difference between the two. So what's interesting about this is mostly it's the same, except the formatting is somewhat different, so you have to be paying attention. And I put in the chat, I put a link to my my blog, which has a link in it where you can download a copy of this presentation and a copy of this spreadsheet so that you can have it for your reference. It has the side-by-side comparison of what the old field was with what the new field is, because it's very convenient to have that, because there are a lot of them. But a couple of things that I noticed that were different. Number one, the address 1 and address 2 fields, they used to be separate. Now it's combined into a single merge tag. There's a few new ones: current day, current month, and current year. The other thing that is not in here anymore is the account description field as a standard thing. That's no longer there. And the HTML signature, which used to be a part of the Pardot account record, is no longer available as a merge field in favor of the individual fields which describe someone's email address, their phone number, and their title, etc., which it's inheriting essentially from the Salesforce record if you have Salesforce and Pardot accounts synchronized. So that is a difference. Which makes it super important. We'll get to that of making sure those fields are up to date in Salesforce. So anyway, the download's available. Please feel free to use it. So what does HTML allow us to do? Well, what it allows us to do, just like merge tags, it allows us to do a tremendous amount of customization in an individual email. In fact, you can put 200 merge tags in an email field where you can only have 10 pieces of dynamic content available. So the basic way that it works is that it's basically a yes, no, if, else question. So if the merge field has something in it, then it shows some statement if there's data there, else some other statement if the merge field is blank. And then there is this close if in the merge inside the handlebars. So it's basically these three parts: the pound if, the merge field, handlebars else, handlebars close if. So that's the basic simple logic. So what kind of fields can you use for this? Well, a couple of things that I wanted to point out. Most of the standard fields are fine: text, numbers, dates, etc. Use caution with things like checkboxes and radio buttons. Display multiple responses basically doesn't work at all. If you have default field values set, it's not really going to work because that sort of overrides the purpose of having blank, no blank. But the caution with checkboxes and radio buttons is this: if you have those fields synced to Salesforce, Salesforce doesn't let a checkbox be null. Salesforce wants the checkbox value to be false. So it kind of doesn't work when you sync to Salesforce and that checkbox is synced to a Salesforce checkbox field, because once that field syncs, it's going to be true or false. So you can use it if it's not synced as a handlebar merge field, but just be careful, because that's gonna mess you up, because Salesforce doesn't like to call a blank checkbox null. So here's the first little trick: is you can show multiple merge fields inside of the statement. If the merge field has a value in it, that it can include the same merge field value and other ones, again, if that condition is true. Else you show a third merge field if the merge field is blank. So it doesn't matter, you can put as many merge fields as you want into the if statement or the else statement. You can include everything that you want in there. The other thing is you don't have to include the switch value. So if the merge field that you're looking for is the switch, it doesn't have to be inside the statement. It can be simply the switch. It doesn't have to be inclusive in the statement that you're displaying. So here's a specific example of showing the multiple merge fields. And this is, let's say you've got a contact that's synchronized to Salesforce and it has an owner. And you want to show on this contact, if it's owned by somebody, that specific rep's name, phone number, and email. And this is why you have to be careful that those things are populated in Salesforce, because that's where it's essentially pulling them from. So the owner name, phone, email, and anything else from that user profile. So if the person has an assignment, you can show their sales rep's information. If they don't have an assignment, then you could put in something like, would you like to schedule a call, or would you like to talk to us about our solution, and then click here to your scheduling system or whatever. So the point is that you can show this if they're assigned, or don't show it if they're not, and maybe you have some other default information like the call center or something like this. So that's a good example of if the person is assigned, show this. If not, show something else. All right, which brings us to cool trick number 1. So prospect resubscribe. This is something that's now enabled when you've got Handlebar merge language enabled, and this is again something that they kind of launched recently, and a lot of people weren't even aware it's there. In order to see whether or not it's even enabled in your org, you've got to go to the settings and the account, and then actually hit the edit button and go down to the section that says prospect resubscribe. And if the pick a template checkbox is empty, you're not enabled. So make sure that if you're doing this, that you go through those steps that you need to do to even enable this feature. So prospect resubscribe basically says that if somebody's trying to fill out a Pardot field and they have been unsubscribed, it's going to pop up a little warning here inside the field itself, or sorry, inside the form itself, that says you've unsubscribed, and they don't even have to have this filled out as long as they're cookied. It's going to fill in their email, and it'll pop this open on the form even before they do anything. So, which is kind of great, because if you've got that form there and they've already unsubscribed, you can say, hey, you've unsubscribed, you can still fill this out, but you're not going to get any more of our great content. So, but the problem with this is this only works on Pardot forms. It does not work on form handlers if that's the way that your organization works. So here's a workaround for using it on form handlers or operational emails. So first of all, what you have to do is you have to create a special field to watch for if they're completely opted out, so because there's no way to select this as a merge tag. So what you have to do is create a custom field that's basically somebody's opted out and set that as yes. So then you're basically your switch field. If that switch field is opted out, you can put a notice in an email that you send that says you've opted out, click here to resubscribe. And if you don't, just don't put anything in there. So it only shows up if somebody's getting an email. Let's say you've got forms on your website they fill out, and it sends them the autoresponder or whatever, but it doesn't sorry, you've opted out. It still sends the form submit, but they don't get anything else. So this gives you the opportunity to give them that option. Also, this works in a email that is sent by the operational format. So in other words, show this if they're unsubscribed. Don't show it if they're not. Now the way to do that is just to create the link using the email builder, and you click the link type as the resubscribe link, and it automatically fills in your resubscribe handlebars there. So that's how you get that link to populate right on your content. So here's another tip. Once populated, Pardot does not want to give up data. So it's very hard to reset fields to null. Now you can do it with an automation rule, and you're going to have to do that if you deploy this trick, because if they opt back in, you somehow have to clear that switch field that says they're opted out. So use a automation rule that if they've not opted out, then to clear that special field that you created for if they were opted out. So you need to be able to clear that field when they do opt back in, so that you aren't keeping showing them that field that says they've unsubscribed. All right, trick number 2, showing HTML links or not. So one thing that you can do with a custom field in Pardot is you can just have a full HTML value in there. So for example, if somebody owned a specific product, you could show them the product URL as a piece of your content. So for example, if they owned product 1 or 2 or 3, it would show the link to that product's documentation or something else that you wanted to display on that product. If tip 2 here though is the else part can be blank. So if they don't own that product, because we haven't put anything in else. It's just not going to show you anything. So if they own product 1 and 3, it would show them the first 2 links for products 1 and 3, but not anything for 2 and 4. So here's another riff on this. If you use the handlebar merge in the link instead of rendering the full link, okay, so you can just use that in the URL builder in the email with the protocol other, then you use your handlebar merge in the URL field, and it'll render that behind the text that says product 1 document with the URL link in it. So that's a way to, again, you don't have to show the full link. You could show text linked to it, and you would use it this way. Now, the reason you use it this particular way is because I'm rendering the full link with the HTTPS in it. I'm rendering the full links in that merge in that custom field. The reason you do that is if you do not want to track that traffic. Okay, so if you do it this way, it would not track whether or not somebody clicked that. There's reasons why you might want to do that. Maybe it's going to documentation that you don't care whether you're tracking it or not. You don't want to track that as a click. That's why you would do that. If you do want to track it, however, then don't render it as the full link. Render it alternatively. Render it alternatively without the HTTPS in it, and use the HTTPS protocol instead. So this way, the link will be rewritten and it will be tracked. So again, if you don't want to track, use the full link as your field. If you do want it tracked, then don't put in the HTTP protocol. Put in only the rest of the address. All right, trick number 3. Using HML to show alternative custom redirects. So let's suppose you had 2 different conditions that you wanted to show, and you wanted to have a custom redirect with some kind of a completion action on it. So if the condition 1 exists, you could show one custom redirect, which has a certain type of completion action on it. And if that condition is not populated, then you could show a different one. So in other words, you can then get out of the same piece of content, you can show one custom redirect or another, and get different kinds of completion actions depending on what your field of interest was. So you can click it. So they would click it if their condition was populated. It would give them one option, and if it wasn't, it'd give them another option. So this is a way that you can use that kind of logic to get different custom redirect actions out of the same piece of displayed content. So here's trick number 4, and that's using HML to populate a custom URL. So here's an example that we had before with the if the person was assigned or not. Maybe you have some kind of a Calendly connection here, and you want to put in a link for them to schedule a call. Well, Calendly in particular will accept a URL parameter link, which allows you to pass to the Calendly a whole bunch of different parameters that pre-fills all of the fields in your Calendly appointment. So all they have to do is pick a time, and then everything else is filled out for them. What's cool about this, though, is that you could also insert into that URL the recipient owner's Calendly link, so that it could be dynamically generating that URL based on the recipient owner's name, as long as that fits with the Calendly format for how that complete URL is constructed. But you can see here in the highlighted, I've got the name equals, and then you use the recipient's first name and last name, and then the email address as a pre-fill URL parameters. Calendly has some documentation on this, but it is something that I've used quite effectively for several clients, where you basically click the link, and all you have to do is pick a time, and it fills out the rest for them. So here's another riff on this: is populate a custom URL link, but only if the prospect is a customer. Again, I had a client with a customer ID that they wanted to populate, and that was part of a custom URL that was special to that particular customer. So in this case, if they were already a customer, it showed them a link with their special URL where the customer ID was part of the URL itself, and it pre-filled their email for the login. And if they were not a customer, it showed them some other link because they weren't a customer. So again, it won't show them something that's broken. If it's not populated as customer, you just show them some other content, or don't show them any content. All right, last trick, using HML to populate a form handler. So this is one of my favorite things about Pardot data, which is the what's your t-shirt size and the vegan gluten-free lunch option. So a lot of times we're asked as professionals, operations professionals, to create things that don't make any sense long term. So things like, well, I'm having an event and I want to know what the t-shirt size is, and I want to ask that on this form. Or I want to know who wants a vegan lunch for this event. Now, all this is, of course, helpful for this activity, but it isn't the kind of data you want to store in Pardot long term. So there's this concept that I know is floating around out there that a lot of people use called either burner fields or flex fields, where you might be collecting this data temporarily to use for the purposes of an event. Here's a way to use that kind of strategy. Or to avoid it altogether by using form handlers to rewrite information that you're sending via Handlebar merge. So riff one here is that you can use a form handler as a link in any Pardot email you send. So you can send a form handler as a link in an email as if it was any other link. But you can use this as an alternative to making someone fill out another form. So for example, you could have 3 different links. Click here for medium shirt, click here for large, click here for an extra large. And each link is formatted in such a way that it's filling out the form handler when you are submitting the field. So you are filling out that Handlebar merge information of who the recipient was, and for example, the switch here is that the recipient is attending some specific event. Maybe that's you're using in your burner or your flex field. But then the large shirt is just written into the information manually. It's not actually a merge field at all. See the $20 large, $20 shirt, and that is writing into the field large shirt with 2 spaces. So that's a way that you can get that into the form handler as a link inside of an email, so that you can actually just write that information into the comments section of their Pardot record instead of writing it into some field. Riff 2 is you can actually use that same strategy to copy information from one field to another, to concatenate data into another field, or to add additional notes. So I've given you a little bit of URL encoding tips there down in the corner. But again, you can use these URL parameters in your form handler, and you can combine information into the same field or write information into the same field more than once. One thing about form handlers is you can submit in the same form handler submit the same field more than once. You can submit to the comments multiple times if you want to. It doesn't matter. So in this case, I'm writing information into the comments field by combining multiple pieces of information from Handlebar merge, so that I'm getting a comment that's a concatenation of multiple pieces of information from multiple different sources, along with a couple of individual notes that are relevant to this particular link. So riff 3, if you really want to get fancy, is you can repeat riff 2 using a form handler and JavaScript in the thank you code of a Pardot form to just simply transfer and transform that form's input data to the form handler itself. So that's one thing that you can do, and that's kind of a further advanced tip if you want to just transfer that information as part of an initial form submit in the first place. So a couple of final thoughts, and I know we're short on time here. We've got another session coming up in 4 minutes, so I'll be quick. Number 1, you cannot use nested if statements. I've tried it. It doesn't work. Hopefully Salesforce is listening. That would be cool. Second thing is please, 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 please never, ever, 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 ever implement this without doing a thorough test. Else unintended consequences, close stroke, if. I hate sending out, we're sorry, we sent you a horrible, wrong email kind of emails. So please, please, please do testing. Test everything. Test every variation you can think of. It's always a good idea. And that is the end of this. And remember, handlebars are just a sideways bow tie. I hope we have time for questions. If not, I'm hanging around. I'm hanging around inside the event all week. And I think I have one Q&A at this point. So does this mean to do a signature, you need to use all individual components? Guess there won't be any pretty HTML formatting then? Well, actually, no, there could be, because you could put the HTML formatting in the email and just use the merge tag to fill the value. So yes, you could definitely do the formatting, but you just use the merge tags to populate the value behind the scenes. So I don't know if there are any other questions, but as I said, I'll be hanging around the event for the next couple of days on and off. So if you want to put a question into the general chat and tag me on it, please feel free. I'd be happy to. And thank you all for your attendance. Really glad to be here. And thank you very much. The next session is in a couple of minutes. And here's a few other things. Oh, what's the use case for tip 3? Gosh, I have to go back to what tip 3 is. Oh, alternative custom redirects. Well, again, if you had a specific condition that you wanted to show a redirect for that versus that person is not valid, I want to show a different redirect and show them something else. So back to the event thing. Perhaps they were registered for the event or not registered for the event. So the custom redirect might be go here to access your event information, and the alternative one was no, you have to sign up, and the alternative redirect would be click something to send them a reminder of what the login page is or something like that. So again, always what do I know versus what do I don't know? What other things could I display? So in the interest of stopping this so that people can get to the next session, I'm going to say goodbye for now. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and take care. Have a great conference.